Now I'm going to bring Eli in. And Eli, through your various things you worked on the Gates Foundation over time, from the college readiness indicator systems way back when, to our work on PASS and the more recent work on the for school improvement, you've seen sort of the evolution of predictive indicators and on-track systems, and just what's your reflection on their possibilities, their potential, and some of their challenges?
So as I think you know from our work together, like there was a period of time where, at least in my organization, getting support for this type of work was, you kind of had to sneak some grants in the back door, that sort of thing, to get the.
You were on the fringe.
To get the PASS network launch. But now, a third of our work, a third of our funding, and our largest body of work is for something that we call Networks for School Improvement, where it's basically groups of middle schools and high schools that work together with a central organization that identify common problems of practice that they want to focus on, common approaches to addressing improving outcomes for Black, Latino, and low-income students on a set of on-track indicators that we believe are predictive of successful post-secondary transitions. And so, just to be a little bit more specific, kind of align to the work group recommendations, there's right now there are 4 composite indicators, composite outcomes that different networks are focused on. There's a middle school on track composite outcome made up of GPA and attendance and some course completion. There's a 9th grade on track that is focused on course credits and GPA and attendance. There's one called College Ready on Track that's about advanced course taking and GPA and high school graduation, and then one called Well-Matched Post-Secondary Enrollment that's about FAFSA completion, ensuring students apply to a balanced portfolio of institutions, and completing college entrance exams, and then supporting them through the summer before college. And so, certainly seeing the work of school systems and organizations that are part of the PASS network, and then the research that you've done and folks in the Chicago Consortium and others, has been highly influential in shaping our decision to place such a large bet on supporting school systems who want to pursue this type of work. And so, by the end of 2019, expecting that we will have funded a total of 30 network grants. So 21 of those would be large, multi-year, multi-million-dollar grants. About 9 that will be more on the order of about 2 years, closer to $500,000. And then there's an additional 14 where these are organizations that are interested in supporting a network in the future, but want to focus on building a few skills that they think will be critical to that, and whether that's about strengthening their connections with partnerships, whether that's about deepening their understanding of supporting school teams' continuous improvement skills, that sort of thing. And so, the networks that have been at it the longest, at least with our funding, have only been at it slightly over a year. But I can speak to some of the kind of tensions that I think we're starting to see aligned to some of the work with recommendations. So, so as I mentioned before, we kind of put out, here are some composite indicators that we believe, based on some of the evidence base, are aligned to where students need to be on a trajectory towards succeeding when they enter post-secondary. For a lot of the networks that we're funding, it's a relatively slim group of students who are even close to that threshold. And so, starting to have conversations about, we understand why that's the goal. There's a big difference in terms of being able to attain a family sustained wage if you're on that trajectory, if you're not. But at the same time, there's questions of, can we do more good by focusing on a larger group of students? Maybe improving their trajectory, even if setting targets at that trajectory, it seems like we're less likely to hit that than if we, And so it doesn't have to be an either or, but that's real, and certainly the way that we set targets, set goals, and what incentives we create around that influence what people focus on and which students are the focus of some of these interventions. Some of the other issues that are coming up are, if you create a composite where it's all about, are you exceeding this threshold on all the different underlying indicators? If students aren't meeting that larger threshold, you can lose sight of, well, there is actually some real progress on some of those underlying indicators. I know in the EWS recommendation, we talked a bit about there's value in having this composite, especially when it aligns with research, but the underlying indicators are a lot more intuitive for school staff to work on. Like, I understand what it means to work on attendance. I understand what it means to focus on PPA. I don't necessarily understand, what do I do now if I want to raise 8th grade on track? And so, we're seeing how some of those issues are playing out about how much attention to put on this composite versus underlying indicators. And then, honestly, we had a 5th composite that we had invited people to work on, which was early secondary momentum, and haven't awarded any grants with that, just based on the application that we got in. And I think largely it was because expectations of both what data you would need to be able to access to work on that, and realistically, what could a high school team work on with rapid cycles in terms of having access to those data? Just didn't really make sense to people. Like, what would a high school team do around early post-secondary course credit accumulation? So that's one where we just, we haven't funded any there because, it just hasn't happened for us. And then finally, so the approach of the RFP so far has been, here are the outcomes, composite outcomes indicators. You tell us what makes sense to work on in your context. You tell us what strategies you want to pursue. But we're going to insist that you incorporate into your plan some form of continuous improvement process as part of designing interventions and progress monitoring along the way. And I think we're starting to see, some of the networks really raise questions about if you have a really structured data review process, student progress monitoring, does it really matter whether you're using continuous improvement as a technical term or not? If continuous improvement is implicit in what the school staff are doing, but it's not like they know the lingo, they know the tools, does that really matter? And so that's something that's coming to a head as well.
So I just want to note on that too is that we've had our program for 5 or 6 years now, and it's gone through several different school boards, 2 different superintendents, a huge change in senior leadership. And the program still exists, but it's definitely changed and been modified over the years as we've had to rethink the best ways to do the recruitment or what the best ways to do success. In the beginning, we only focused on getting the kids in, enroll them, and we're like, wait, we really need to help them once they get into the class. And then it was like, okay, we need to start looking at our AP pass rates, our passing rates for those courses, and thinking about that too. So we kind of had to continually rethink the process as it's evolved.
So we've heard a little bit about what the work group recommended. We've heard about how a district is tried to apply a piece of that. We learned about how outside foundation has thought about using those indicators and what they're learning as they're working with schools and districts who are doing so. And that leaves us with our final question. We're going to ask you to talk about it at your table and then share out if you want. And then we invite you to come up and ask us direct questions afterwards. But our question is, after all you've heard, who needs to be convinced of what for an early warning system 2.0 approach to getting kids ready for post-secondary success or college success to be used widely? So who needs to be convinced of what for this approach that we've outlined and talked about some of its strengths, some of its challenges to be used widely?
I'll share. So I shared out that I thought it would be the business community. In our city in particular, there's an ongoing narrative that from our business community that the college isn't for everyone, not every student needs to go to college, and I respect that, but I often think our business community is envisioning that student who could have gone to an elite 4-year institution who's opting out, like the ones who got the 3.0 and go to community college, right? They opt out because they're more clear about what they want to do, and college isn't necessary for them. So for us, if we can convince them that college can still be an important pathway for post-secondary success, if we were to apply EWS 2.0 as a strategy, I think they could be really convinced that college it can still be incredibly meaningful for students for whom this is critical for them to have career success later.
Thanks. Anybody else have needs to be convinced of what to share? Yep.
Yeah, I kind of talked quite a bit, but hopefully I'll make this truncated. So Tennessee Achieves runs the Tennessee Promise Last Dollar Scholarship. So they're targeting our students, and they get an email and a half a day saying, go to college, go to community college, go to community college, go to community college. It's free, it's free, it's free. And what happens is, since 2013, our cohort from the high school at which I'm located has a 0% graduation rate. Mm-hmm. So if we can convince them, like, hey, our students who are 2.7, 90% plus their attendance, who are taking the core plus AP or other episodes, lay off of these kids, please. Yeah, so that's been something that I think we can work with the community college plus the person or the group that organizes that Last Dollar Scholarship. That would be supportive.
Kind of related to that is, in my experience, going through a 2-year college and finishing requires significant more student agency than going to a 4-year institution. And so I have concerns when large percentages of students are going to, I think the 2-year option is a great option, but it needs to be designed for a cohort, kind of get on the track and at least supplement existing student agency in a way that gets to the next place. So I wonder about San Jose. Have you seen anything regarding that? I know you've been enrollment, but is there any persistence?
I don't recall off the top of my head persistence information, but yes, it tends to be higher for the students who are
Yeah.
the 2 years and then it is like
Over here on the back.
So a couple of things I also think about is also, with the rising cost of education, right, on the 4-year side, like what, is the student, that ratio, like what's the finish in terms of, so I think that's important, right? So again, as I share with my table, I have a director of college readiness, so I am all for it. However, I'm just thinking about, how we message to students. So, I think, post-secondary education doesn't have to be a 4-year degree, and even not even a 2-year degree, it can be a certificate. And so, like, thinking through some of those certificate programs that for some students will garner a lot more success for them as opposed to a 4-year degree, especially, just think we're preparing our students for jobs that don't yet exist. And so, as we prepare students for those things, like, what does that look like? And so I just, I definitely am always mindful of students and just always like, what's your why and what is it that you're trying to accomplish?
We have someone more back there.
Yeah, so our organization focuses on policy making at the state and federal level. And so when I read that question, I'm immediately thinking about state and federal policymakers need to be convinced more about the indicators that actually lead to success. with the reauthorization of the Every Student Succeeds Act, and even within CLB, a lot of it is focused on assessments and student performance on assessments and weighing assessments and accountability systems and teacher evaluation. But in your predictive indicators, you didn't mention assessments. And so I'm just curious to know how school districts like San Jose feel about that, what Gates is thinking about the role and influence of assessments and predictability of success, and how that messes with your accountability, if at all, and what teachers or how you're shaping your kind of your instruction in the classroom, and teacher that what does that mean for you on a practical level if those indicators are not really lifted as measures of success, outcome, long-term outcomes. So I don't know if that's a question back to you. I'm just thinking I think state and federal policymakers should be more aware of these data so that when they're passing policy about requiring all kids to take high school exit exams, and I know Marie is in the room and so she knows that I talk about this ad nauseum, but what does this really mean holistically? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we have to come to a close, but I think two things that come out from this for me is really the need and how powerful local data is, but not just within the K-12, but the K-12 plus higher ed plus employer sector. Because, so two quick examples, if you look at the Georgetown good job data, which I find very convincing about where are the good jobs that pay daily supporting wage, 56% of them and growing are BA jobs. So that is a growing sector. You can't, yes, not everybody needs a BA, but you have to acknowledge it is a growing sector, and 3 out of the 4 jobs people have with BAs are good jobs. The middle, the AA and certificate is growing, and 25% of the good jobs are found that way. And the high school only is 20% and declining, right? So you can see that's not. But the quick thing here is that at a city level, right? Boston, for example, 40% of the kids are going the AA route, yet only 25% of the good jobs are there, right? Following this logic, everyone doesn't need to go to college or they don't need a 4-year degree, those are all alternatives. True, but you gotta get the numbers right. So who your kids are, what's open in your community, and in some urban areas, it's gonna be more skewed to BAs than AAs, just because who's moving in as far as what type of jobs are moving in. So it's really important to get that local knowledge. And on your high school exit exam, same thing. That people voted for all those crazy high school exit exams before anyone did a longitudinal study to show they mattered, and they got themselves in an arms race that more just had to be better. And then when they got double trapped, then when they peeled that back, was suddenly you're lowering standards, right? And if they had actually, and I just have to go, but a hobby horse is at that point in time, actually state longitudinal data systems did exist. It wasn't impossible, they just chose not to do it. So building that local data set to follow where your kids actually go, I think is a real lever to really make informed choices among how many kids should be going in different pathways and what's the best indicators to say